Well, thank you so much. I'm so really grateful to be here. This conversation really sits at the center of everything that I teach and everything that I believe. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm grateful to Dr. Osiriton to be invited. And as she mentioned, I have 20 years in background of technology, engineering, strategic communications, and now work with founders and entrepreneurs to develop conviction-led brands. So, what I want to talk about is heart centered mentorship. And when I think about that, we think about how learning changes when people feel seen. And people feel seen when their mentorship honors their human side, not just their goals, their tasks, or their performance. And before I became an executive coach, I was leading a team of engineers, interns, mid level developers, senior architects, and some of them had been writing code when I was still playing on the playground. The biggest lesson that I learned was that technical skills can create output and emotional intelligence creates opportunity. Every person is motivated differently and they carry different insecurities and they need a different kind of support. And so my job wasn't to be the smartest person in the room. It was, it was to unlock the motivation that was already inside of them. And intrinsic motivation, it only grows in environments where people feel safe enough to be curious. And that's really where heart-centered mentorship can begin. And so I learned really quickly that you cannot empower someone you haven't truly heard. And so the first layer of this kind of mentorship is fairly simple, but it's rarely practiced well. The most underrated leadership skill truly is listening, not passive listening, but the kind where you're really watching for what's said and what's also unsaid. And this is the kind where someone can finally breathe a sigh of relief because they don't feel rushed or judged or corrected. And this is when I started to understand that this was what I needed to be the backbone of my team's culture. Because I had developers who were brilliant, but they doubted themselves. I had interns who felt relatively invisible and insecure. I had senior engineers who carried unspoken burnout. And the moment that I shifted from how do I fix this to what's actually happening for you, that's when everything started to shift and to change in my own leadership and in my team. Trust grows when people feel believed, and trust fuels innovation. And, we toss around this word EQ, emotional intelligence, quite a bit. But the real depth is when we can create psychological safety where people can disagree, they can debate, they can challenge, and they can build something better together. Innovation doesn't happen when we're all compliant. It happens through conversations. And there's a few books that I use that really shaped my approach pretty early on. There was Radical Candor by Kim Scott. That helped me to speak with both honesty and with care. The Coaching Habit, that taught me to stay curious a little bit longer. And The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This one deepened my understanding in each person's zone of genius. And when you can merge clarity, curiosity, and someone else's unique gifts, you can then empower them beyond measure. And that really leads into then the next layer, seeing the whole story behind someone else's learning journey. And I apologize if you can hear some background noise. We have some things going on. So because someone feels safe enough to share, you finally get to understand and why they learn or they struggle or that they lead the way that they do. Every learner and mentor arrives with a story. Their upbringing, their fears, their identity, their internal pressures. And all of it sits in the room with them, whether we acknowledge it or not. And when I mapped my team's emotional responses, we used communication styles, we determined what their individual personalities were, and I realized that no two people needed the same levels of support. And so one of the great resources that you can use is Ecman's Atlas of Emotions. It can be found online at atlasofemotions.org. Because I had a developer who feared slowing down, they looked at resting as failure, as being lazy. I had another who was afraid to speak up, especially when she was the only woman developer in the room. And I had another who was overlooked so many times that they just started to shut down. Empathy mapping isn't about being soft, it's about being accurate. And it tells you what someone is protecting inside of them. This is the understanding that allowed me to help engineers really build their careers, not just complete tasks. And it what allows mentors to guide someone forward without accidentally stepping on their history. So naturally, once you know who they are and what they carry, then you can build their future with them, not for them. Because at some point, mentorship becomes really less about instruction and it's more about partnership. And so a lot of the times I hear mentorship really explained or described as telling someone else what to do based on their own experiences. And I look at heart-centered mentorship as let's build this together. Co-creation gives the learner ownership. It empowers them to trust their own decision making, and that creates resilience. Oftentimes, my clients, they tell me that I didn't solve their problems, but I helped them to solve their problems for themselves. And that's how we start to empower people to rise. Because when people design the plan with you, they're going to be far more committed to seeing it through. And this is the same principles that we use in team coaching, where we develop transformational KPIs or agreements that the team can then create to support one another. They hold each other accountable. They call out challenges. All of this before cracks really start to create the foundation of the team. These KPIs, they're not performance metrics. They're relational commitments. And they say that when you struggle, I'm struggling with you. And when you win, we're winning with you. And this is the kind of shared responsibility, but it requires an immense amount of courage. The courage to speak up, the courage to challenge, the courage to commit wholeheartedly to where it is that you're wanting to go and take the team. And it builds teams with heart, not just output. And that's what creates the kind of culture where vulnerability isn't a threat, it's a strength. Because when people can co-create their growth, they also need a leader who isn't performing out of perfection, but modeling humanity. You cannot call someone into courage while pretending that you've never been afraid. And really, vulnerability doesn't mean that you are oversharing. It just means that you're grounded enough to say, I haven't always had this figured out either, but I'm willing to be committed in learning this with you. When I mentor people through the Women Tech Network or work with leaders across different industries, many are surprised that the most powerful thing that I bring to them isn't strategy. It's honest curiosity. Because when a mentor is authentic, this gives the learner permission to stop performing. And this is when they can truly start growing, because your story then becomes the bridge, not the spotlight. And when a learner knows that they're safe to be imperfect, then you finally get to measure the outcome that matters the most. Because all of this heart-centered work isn't abstract. It produces measurable change. And while most organizations are measuring performance output, few measure the relationship that produces it. But the truth is really simple. When people feel supported, their work reflects it. Their retention increases, their engagement rises, their problem solving improves, their confidence stabilizes. And I've watched clients climb out of burnout, rediscover their voice, and rise into leadership positions. And not because their skills suddenly improved, but because their belief did. And belief is what grows in the soil of safe and purposeful mentorship. If you'd like to deepen your leadership practice, you can find my resources on my website at jessicaricecoaching.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to further have conversations with you. But if you could remember one thing, you cannot teach the mind until you've connected with the heart. Skills will transfer, beliefs will transform. And when we mentor the human behind the learner, we don't just create performance, we can create courage. Thanks so much.